Hello, and thank you everyone for joining us. Today we're going to discuss the power of inclusion for marketeers, and this forms part of our week of education on the National Inclusion Week. Before we get started, Michael's going to take us through a few webinar housekeeping points that he'd like to run us through.
Yes, thank you, Ross, and welcome everyone to our webinar. Before we get started, you'll see that everyone is on mute. This is to avoid background noise, so we don't have to worry about that. To enable live caption, please click the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, then show subtitles. Questions can be asked via the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll collect these up together and we can discuss them at the end of the webinar. If anyone does have any technical problems or problem hearing, please just drop it in the chat and the team will do their best to support you on this. The webinar is being recorded and will be updated at a later date. So anyone who has missed it, they are able to access the webinar at a later date. Today's session will be interactive. We'll be using polls, so please make sure to get involved and answer some of the questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Okay, let's kick things off with a round of introductions. I'll get started. My name is Ross Linnett, and I am the CEO and founder of Recite. Rebekah, do you want to go next?
I will, thank you, Ross. Hi everyone, I'm Rebekah-Lee. I am the Group Head of Marketing at Morson Group. I'm responsible for the digital, social and content strategy for our group of businesses which are global. Morson Group is predominantly a recruitment business which operate across a range of sectors from aerospace and defence to infrastructure to tech and IT and professional services. We work with clients like Man United, Network Rail, McLaren and Manchester Airport Group, which is exciting. My background is in retail and product marketing, and I've been in recruitment marketing for over 7 years. I'm passionate about the consumer experience, and I believe that creating inclusive experiences is the cornerstone of any successful marketing strategy, no matter your industry.
Okay, and Nick?
Yeah, hi Ross, hello everyone. So yes, I'm Nick Hughes. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at SEGRO. SEGRO is a FTSE 40 company. We are 102 years old. We started in Slough and we still own we're a property company. We still own our original asset, which is the Slough Trading Estate. Our area of property is industrial and logistics, and we operate in the UK and 7 continental European countries. We've got I think a portfolio value of something around 20 billion. So we've got a lot of industrial and logistics bits of property. We are, as you probably deduced already, very much a B2B proposition. And that means that I'm going to be looking through the lens today of a B2B marketer rather than a B2C marketer. I think for us at SEGRO, diversity, equity, inclusion is fundamentally important. I'm sort of a bit mixed, really. The first half of my career was spent in creative agencies, which of course, huge meritocracy. People come into marketing and comms from all manner of backgrounds. And therefore, I guess diversity and inclusion was never, for me, much of an issue, because I think like most people in marcoms, you don't really see a huge amount of it. Very different now to working in-house in a real estate business, a property company, which does not enjoy the same level of diversity and inclusion, hasn't traditionally, as industries like marcoms. And of course, that leads on to the danger, as social psychologists would say, of talking about in-groups and repeating who you're going to hire and work with and get on with. It is, as I say, it's a fascinating situation to be working at a propco and being hopefully in the vanguard of real estate at SEGRO when it comes to DE&I.
Very cool. Well, you guys have totally put my introduction to shame. But one thing I promised myself is that this will be about the webinar and educating people, and I try not to kind of plug our product too much and put my sales hat on. So I will I will give people a little background about the company as I can and try and facilitate some education and some learning. So okay, background to National Inclusion Week. This is actually the 10th year of National Inclusion Week. Last year's was called United for Inclusion. This year is the time to act and the power is now. And I genuinely believe that the power is now for marketeers to act, because inclusion is not just known as something that marketeers should embrace because it's the right thing to do. It'll improve the UX, but it'll also help you reach a much wider audience. And hopefully through this webinar, we'll have you convinced or possibly more understanding in a greater sense how this is the case. So then, a good way to start off is to kick off with some accessibility facts. So I'll pass over to Michael now. As we said, it is going to be a bit more interactive. So you're going to see things, you're going to see polls, you're going to see PowerPoints. So Michael, I'll pass over to you to talk us through some facts.
Thank you very much. I will just share my screen. So before we jump into some sort of business marketing related, it's good to set a foundation around global facts and figures of what inclusion really means. And it's not just people with disabilities, it can be everything possibly, you know, and even down to 13% of the population speaking English as a first language within the UK. We've got learning difficulties, even visual impairments all play their part in how we can provide an inclusive experience for people online and how marketing can support that. Moving on to online accessibility, we also have a bunch of sort of facts here that provide information that you need to be able to make your website accessible. Look, around 69% of people with disabilities leaving a website that have a barrier. We as marketeers need to be able to reduce that for our offering and be able to have people have better user experience on our website. And then when it comes into being an inclusive brand, we have to see how people interact with our brands. 70% of young millennials choose a brand over a competitor if they demonstrate inclusivity. That's exactly what we need to be doing when we're sort of showcasing what we do and what we are about. So hopefully I've set the scene there, ready for today's conversations.
Also, I would encourage people to get access to the slides because it's got the source of the information there. And when you look into the facts and figures and the business case behind being an inclusive marketeer, it's actually quite staggering, and it's also very staggering how much of the market, from visual impairments to dyslexia to Asperger's, has all been ignored, and it's potentially a way of accessing such a greater wider audience. So that segues us nicely into my first question. So to the panel, our websites are our digital shop windows. They represent us. How does being an inclusive brand enhance your reputation and identity? And I will start off with Rebekah again. Sorry, Rebekah, I keep throwing you in first.
I know, so. Jesus Christ. I think, as I said to me earlier, embedding inclusion and purpose in the brand experience is absolutely key. For Morson, because we're a recruitment business, we are gatekeepers to the world of work for so many people. We place, over 20,000 people a year globally onto, huge projects at scale, and we operate in particularly the engineering space, which is one of those spaces which is the hardest hit by imbalances. And therefore, making jobs and online content accessible is not just a reputational consideration, it's a responsibility for us, and it's an absolute requirement. I suppose tools like Recite enable us to kind of practice what we preach. We're opening up the world of work for people from all backgrounds, and these online accessibility tools showcase how we're actively enabling those with non-traditional user journeys to be able to create actions online, whether that's applying for a job, whether that's interacting with content, whether that's being inspired by a piece of storytelling content. It's the right thing to do, but it also doesn't hurt that we're showcasing best practice from a business point of view. Our clients and the organisations that we work with are consistently asking us what we're doing to make the experience for candidates better, how to make the attraction process more inclusive, to reach those wider talent pools. Also, as an organisation looking for talent to work for our business, it's a massive talent attraction tool. As Michael said, it's people looking for jobs with purpose, who are showcasing that they are committed to inclusion. So yeah, it's not even about reputation and enhancement. For me, it's a necessity.
You muted, Ross.
Sorry, schoolboy error. Sorry, schoolboy error. Now I will pass this exactly the same question over to Nick. Nick, would you like me to rephrase that question? Or have you got it? Have you got it?
No, I've got it. Thank you, Ross. Yeah, just picking up on something Rebekah said, and you too, Ross. I mean, being inclusive is the right thing to do from a human perspective. So, you know, before we sort of talk about, you know, business and what it means for business, it is the right thing to do from a human perspective. At SEGRO, we've got 5 primary audience groups who we regard as our key stakeholders, and they are very diverse. We have our customers, the likes of Amazon and others who take long leases on our properties. We have our financial community, who, as a listed business on the FTSE on the London Stock Exchange, even quite critical, very, very critical now. Unfortunately, they are playing a much more important role in terms of making sure that corporates like SEGRO are doing the right thing. We also, as a property company, we need to influence the public sector. So that is public authorities, national government, regional governments, local governments. We also, the fourth one is our employees and potential employees, where critically we have got to be attractive. We've got to be a sensible, well-run business that attracts the right, well, wants to come here because we're the right type of business. And our fifth group is agents or commercial estate agents, really. So when you think of the diversity of those groups, it's absolutely critical for us to be as authentic as we can be with our audiences, because if we're going to influence them positively, we've got to do things right for ourselves when it comes to ED&I issues. So some of the things that we've done as a business recently, we've had diversity and inclusion training for everyone at SEGRO. All managers have had inclusive leadership training. We've got a new approach to taking on graduates. So I mentioned before that in real estate, it is not the most diverse and inclusive industry out there. And that is because there aren't enough diverse role models, frankly. And what we've done is not to go down this year, not to go down the traditional route of hiring from one of 3 universities. We have gone for non-cognate graduates, young people who we think show exceptional talent.
Brilliant.
Rather than just somebody who has got, dare I say it, a godfather who works in property, and therefore he or she has been inspired to do that. For the first year ever, we've signed up with 10,000 Black interns. We had 4 young people from that program doing their internship this summer. They were all absolutely brilliant. They went around the business, met everyone, did a huge amount of great work in 6 weeks. And actually, unfortunately, all of them have got jobs. Otherwise, we just snap them up. We have every 2 years, we have an employee engagement study. And within that, the last one that we did 2 years ago, we had a diversity and inclusion section for the first time. So we're, take it seriously from that point of view. And I think there's a sort of fundamental thing about SEGRO, because we are a property company that builds and owns industrial and logistics property. These tend to be in the poorer parts of towns and cities in the UK and in mainland Europe. And as a consequence, for 102 years, our neighbours tend to be from the less advantaged parts of society. So we have always had an eye out for them. So I'm telling you all of this because, frankly, from our point of view, we have to get it right in-house. We have to be authentically good before we can start to influence our key audiences externally.
Absolutely, and it was one of the sort of themes that was running in the webinar we did yesterday was authenticity, and it's not just doing it because it's a tick box exercise, which, if we're all being honest with ourselves, if you rewind 10 years ago, there were so many companies doing it because it was just, they wanted to be seen to do it. And it is about doing it in the authentic way. So it is great to hear that. It feels like kind of almost because we've been campaigning, like many people, for like 12 years for inclusion, and to see so many people that believe and push inclusion, but actually mean it and follow through. And it's fantastic. It's absolutely genuinely fantastic to see. So the next section, we're going to pass over to Michael, and Michael's going to take us through some polls.
Hi everyone. Yes, so let's get a little bit interactive with our first poll of the day. Laurie, okay to ping that up, please? So how many people limit their shopping to websites that they know are accessible? Interesting one. Give that a few more seconds so everyone can cast their votes. Unfortunately, we can't as panelists.
We're not allowed to, are we?
No, unfortunately not. might be class as cheating.
Yeah, obviously you do know the answer.
Laura, are we able to see that, please? Everyone to see? So 45% people have said 30, 65% have said 52, and oh no, sorry, the other way around. 30% have said 45, 52 have said 65, and only 18 said 85. It was actually 85% is the correct answer. So 85% of people would rather go to a website that is accessible. So looking at competitors from a marketing perspective, that's something that we need to consider to make sure that we're, ahead of the game, ahead of the competitor, making sure that we're attracting that audience. So
it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that most people got that wrong, because when I the first study that was from a study called the Click Away Pound, and when that study first came out, and it was one of the first independent studies, so it wasn't done by an organization that has a vested interest. It was done by initially the National Car Rental that got a research firm to do it. And the fact that 85% of people who go to a website, that if they have an accessibility need and then that accessibility need is not met, so for example, I'm dyslexic, I'd like to have a website that's customizable for me. Ideally, I would like it to be able to speak at the source. If it's not right for me, there's an 85% chance that I will move on to another website that does do that. So this segues quite nicely into my next question. How does an inclusive website increase our online audience? And I will pass that over to Nick first.
Thanks, Ross. In answer, I'm not sure that a bigger audience is necessarily the key metric for us, actually. For us, it's much more about the experience. Much more about the experience. I've all cantered through who our sort of primary audiences are, those 5 key stakeholder areas. I think for us, the critical thing here is to authentically, there's that word again, authentically be open to everyone. We have, through those primary audience groups, got an absolute the range of people who might come to our website, and they have to have the right experience. They have to be able to access the information that we're offering up. But candidly, as Ross and Michael know, we have had Recite Me on our website for about 2 years now. We actually updated our website in May this year. And we did 2 things in that. First of all, we had someone look at all the content from a potential discrimination point of view, i.e., is anything that we're showing pictorially or written down, would that exclude anyone? And fortunately, there wasn't a huge amount. We had to make some changes. So every one of our 3,000 pages has been looked at from that perspective. The second thing that we did, and this is a kind of critical point really, that I think Ross mentioned in his opening remarks, is as I mentioned earlier, we are in the UK and 7 continental European countries, and we have gone multilingual for the first time on SEGRO.com. And interestingly enough, the web traffic we're getting on Recite Me has gone down as a result of that. Not because the product's not brilliant, because it is a brilliant product, but it's literally because a lot of people previously were using Recite Me for translation services, which we're now offering. So, for us, coming back to that point about authentic, we have to do these things. We want to do these things because we want to be open as a website, because it is absolutely the shop window of SEGRO.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the plug. And I'm more than happy. I'm more than happy that you know, it seems like almost Recite might have opened your eyes with regards to the need for internationalization and new languages on your website. And if we're a bridge for you to kind of accept that in a more fuller way, that's us, as far as I'm concerned, fulfilling our mission. So I'll pass over the same question to Rebekah. Rebekah, are you okay? Do you want us to read that out again?
No, I think I've got it. I think we covered it from a slightly different angle to Nick, in that we do want to reach as wide an audience as practically possible, because everyone's a candidate and hopefully everyone's seeking work at some point. I think it's been well documented in the media recently that there is a talent and skills shortage in the UK at the moment and globally. I imagine some of the audience who are looking to hire at the moment are experiencing that. It's for a number of kind of macroeconomic factors, IR35, wage inflation, Brexit. It's all making talent harder and harder to find. There's just less active job seekers there at the moment. So actually for us to be able to deliver for our clients, it's key that we look to different ways to attract, find different talent pools, and to outreach to the maximum amount of people to fill those roles. As we go back to it's not just to fill roles, it's the right thing to do to enable opportunity for all. So actually our clients are coming to us because it's now no longer an option to source from the same talent pool because they're just not there. And actually that's given us a great opportunity. It's meant that we can have meaningful conversations with organizations around disrupting their assumptions when it comes to people that they want to hire, to think differently about how they hire, to think differently about the pools that they hire from. Can they, will a person from an ex-forces background actually be good for this role, or someone who's neurodivergent be good for this role? You'd be amazed the amount of hiring managers who will only hire people who look, sound like them, who've got the same educational background. And actually, because the economy at the moment is forcing them to look further afield, it's actually changing people's perception. So I think it's important to note that we are, by using Recite Me, we're opening up the world of work for those people online. But also it's about making the application process and the recruitment journey itself at all touch points more accessible. Educating our clients and organisations around hiring for stretch, for example. A lot of people will only apply if they reach 100% of the prerequisites of the job application on the job description, sorry. So how can we write job descriptions differently, which emphasise the end goals of the job rather than how it should be accomplished? Hiring managers still use spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes and errors in CV formatting to actually reject candidates.
Yeah.
And it's such a narrow way of thinking. So how the world is at the moment has actually enabled us to have those kind of quite hard-hitting conversations with people around making reasonable judgments, giving people interview questions before the interview itself, which is extremely helpful for some people. So yeah, it's enabled us to increase our online audience online, but also actually in that physical recruitment journey, which kind of reaches those touch points, which goes beyond online.
Yeah, and I'd reiterate those points, Rebekah. Recruitment for our company is one of the biggest challenges that we face. And you hit a point very close to my heart, where they said some people will reject an application based on the fact that they make a spelling mistake. And being a dyslexic and making spelling mistakes, probably, I don't think there's ever a time where I haven't sent an email that hasn't had a spelling mistake in. It doesn't necessarily represent the skill and talent of that person. And the way I always sort of personify that is, what happens if the mind of Shakespeare is sitting inside a person who can't spell, who constantly gets rejected and told that they're not good at English because they can't spell, but they have the skill, and they have the skill to be Shakespeare. And that sort of emphasizes the fact that we've got to often look past, what traditional education has told us to look for with regards to what is good and what is bad, and look for the skill set beyond these sort of superficial measurements, like, can the person spell? Because the spell check is everywhere. But anyway, I would take this off in a completely different direction. So I'll try and keep it on point for marketeers, and I'll not take us into my Shakespeare speech. So I will. We'll move on to another poll.
Yeah,
So Michael, do you want to do the next poll?
of course. Thank you very much. So the next poll we've got for everyone, how many disabled people with access needs click away from a website with barriers? So slightly different from the last one, but hopefully everyone a bit more in tune with the facts that we're providing today. How many disabled people with access needs click away from a website with barriers? Like Ross has said, and others, this might be text is too small, or it's too complicated, or the user journey's too many clicks, or it's just jarring with what they see, and contrast ratios, and all these little sort of website sort of attributes that we should be looking at to improve for everyone online. Okay, are we able to get that? Yeah, everyone knows the score now.
I'm hoping that this is a sign that the audience is getting educated.
Exactly, it's great.
And I think this emphasizes that, everybody, and I mean everybody, even if you're on a neurodivergent scale, expects a first-class online experience that's right for them. So if you're not doing that and not providing that and not marketing in an inclusive way, you're missing this potential audience. So it moves me nicely on to my next question. Guys, globally, people spend an average of 7 hours on the internet a day. And that reading that statistics made me realize I need to get off social media and spend less time online. How does making your website accessible and help people find you, and more importantly, stay on your website? I will start off with Nick.
Yeah, it's a great question for our time, this one, isn't it? And
Yes.
I saw some research recently that said because of our use of technology, the human being now has an average attention span on a par with a goldfish, which is absolutely staggering, really, isn't it? It's a little different for us at SEGRO in the nicest possible way, because there aren't that many people who are going to go shopping for a 500,000 square foot logistics unit with a 10-year lease. So, as I said, we're very much a B2B proposition. Nonetheless, we do play in a competitive landscape. And our product, if we are to really take this down to its simplest form, is very commoditized. It's 4 walls and a roof. We think we build the best ones, but others would say the same. We think we've got the best locations, et cetera, et cetera. But what we're looking for is distinction. We're looking to cut through and stand out within our marketplace. And therefore, our SEGRO.com, our website, is hugely important in that, because what we're trying to do is to bring the brand proposition of SEGRO to our audiences, and hope that it is favorable when compared with other property companies. One of the ways to be distinctive, of course, is to represent clearly what our values are. And that relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion as that, because our audiences will see those things as being hugely important, because they are. So we have got a 102-year track record for a reason. And that is because hopefully we've achieved distinction, and we are using SEGRO.com very much as part of that.
Excellent. I will pass over the same question to yourself, Rebekah.
I am sorry, they have just started drilling and sawing behind me, so sorry if there's a little bit of noise disruption.
No, that's absolutely fine. I was just thinking, because I've had to go home as well, so I'm thinking, oh God, watch somebody knock or drill or something next door. It's one of those things.
This is the office. I don't know what's going on.
Yes,
Excited to see it.
But it's absolutely fine. It's fine. It's one of those things with webinars.
I think for me, the majority of us are going to be marketeers on this call. So as marketeers, no matter our sector, our job is to influence behavior. So how can we do that if we're not making our content or our processes accessible? We're already excluding a huge proportion of our potential consumer base. If we don't implement marketing strategy in a way that puts accessibility first, then we've already failed from an online perspective, I think. we work heavily within the contractor space, so we rely on placing people not only once into a role, but actually replacing them time and time again, whether that's 6 months later, a year later. So it's absolutely key for us to make our consumer journey and our job application process as seamless as possible. It's not only, you know, it's not just, again, going back to this authentic right thing to do, but it's actually a necessity for our business. We need to ensure that everyone from all walks of life are able to apply for roles, because that's the lifeblood of our business. Improved user experience and accessible journeys mean that not only do we place more candidates from diverse backgrounds, but we open the world of work up to more and more people. We get more diversity of thought into the ecosystem, and we bring new perspectives in, and we're gatekeepers to that, and we feel really responsible for that. So Recite Me enables us to really enable those journeys, and it's so incredibly important.
Thank you for another plug.
I'll take my £10.
Okay, then now I will pass it over to Michael.
Thank you very much, everyone. Yes, so I think we've had some important points there, raising over the 3 questions and in the polls and the facts. And before we wrap up for the webinar, I just wanted to try and get a takeaway or a lasting thought from our panelists that someone can take away and maybe try implementing. Maybe my one, I'll start with one. If on your website, check out the alt tags on your images of your website, making sure these are descriptive, helps people online who may be using additional technology. Also from an SEO perspective, get your images put onto Google and other places as well as a search attribute. So that's one little one from me.
Okay, I'll go next, Michael. Mine is almost a thought experiment to marketeers, is that we often see in the accessibility inclusion industry that we operate is that success for us is when people don't have to form groups to be represented to feel heard. You know, so, you know, I'm dyslexic, but you've got to remember that's 15% of the population. And it's actually estimated to be potentially as high as 25. So in the future, what's likely to happen is that we won't really have groups that have the same need to be protected or represented, because it'll just be society. So put yourself forward 50 years, hopefully less than that, when this whole inclusion piece is just society and it's considered that way. And then try and wind back to where you are now and think, how much of your audience are you missing? How much is not being included? How many people are not picking up sales? How many people are not picking up your message? Because they've got an accessibility need for your website or marketing materials that isn't being met. And I think the statistics have probably shown that there's a good chance that you are missing people now. Okay, I'll pass the next one over to Nick. Take away.
Well, yeah, thanks for asking me to follow that, Ross. That was epic, actually. I really like that. I might slightly build on that theme, if I may. You know, at the risk of sounding like a stuck record, is about being authentic, and that means for us and for all good businesses that you must foster an inclusive in-house culture first and foremost before you can do anything else. If you perpetuate the norm and the norm isn't good, you're going to get what I referred to earlier as in groups, what social psychologists call in groups, where you're just not being diverse, and therefore by definition you will not be inclusive. And I heard a very interesting one recently, actually, that if you're a woman in a car crash, you have a 17% more chance of it being fatal, and 47% more chance of being seriously injured over a man. And the reason that is because the engineers who did all the crash test dummy stuff used crash test dummies the size of men.
Wow.
So you've got male engineers who are thinking of things through a male lens only. And as a consequence, and this has only been relatively recently discovered, therefore car safety is being looked at slightly differently. But for years, as a woman, you are more vulnerable for a fatality or a serious injury. So there you have, if you like, the antithesis of inclusion, the antithesis of diverse thought. And that's for me, that's quite a staggering and sober making thought. And that's a big one, obviously, but there are so many little things that we need to get right. Companies need to get right in-house to be authentic before you go out house to your external audiences.
Well, that statistic is staggering, actually, and it just shows there's a lot of bias that we don't realize that we're extending in our lives to people from areas of disability or inclusion. And it reminds me of a conversation I had 2 or 3 days ago with somebody who was dyslexic and already worked in the inclusion space, but then become physically disabled through an accident himself. And he said he didn't realize how much he was biased towards people that were disabled until he become one. So that's almost a thought of reflecting on what you were saying there, Nick. So over to you, Rebecca. The final closing remark. Keynote.
No pressure. I'm not driving home tonight. I think that's one thing I've decided I won't be doing.
Yeah, take the train.
I think I just kind of want to build on that again around that diversity of thought and testing. Test your inclusive journeys, test your hypothesis. If you're putting marketing strategy in place that you've designed to be inclusive, test it with the audience group that you're actually trying to include, because I think I've been guilty of it in my career, is making a lot of assumptions, and actually if you don't test that with your users, with your audience, then how do you know it's fit for purpose? So that would be my final takeaway.
It's almost like we practice this, because essentially you're talking about there's your own internal bias again. So if you're not using the data for people who come from a group that's not that you're not part of, you'll probably use your own bias instead of using the actual data for the people who are having those experiences. So that is very, very important, because we all bring our biases, such as, men designing cars that protect men and not women as much. I think that's staggering. Okay then, Michael, I shall pass it over to you for some audience questions.
Yes, that's no problem. I think what we're going to do is usually we'll gather loads of questions together, but with the webinar going on for this time, it might be best that we collect all these questions and add them to a handover document. So what I'll do is I'll get the team to pull these questions together, and then we can then provide them in a document with everyone's details and information that people can reach out for maybe a question or two. If that sounds okay, and at least it gives our audience the documentation to take away from, and maybe some written down notes of actions that they can take.
Brilliant. Okay, that's absolutely fine with me. Rebecca, Nick, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time. And as a closing remarks, I'd say that I've been involved in this space for 12 years, and it's just fantastic to see that people like yourselves that do it, that are involved in the space but mean it and push it forward. And it's people like you that kind of, it's a genuine thank you for people like yourselves who are pushing inclusion forward. So thank you and good night.
Thanks, Ross. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Safe journey home.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.